Hey everyone, welcome back. So we're going to get right into how to determine what traits you're going to see. So let's just use freckles as an example. Freckles are dominant to no freckles. And so I always use what I call a toolbox. And so in my toolbox, I would put, if I can draw it, there we go, an F. And that's going to equal freckles, okay? So this line here that I put, that indicates the other allele. But if you're dealing with a completely dominant trait, if you have one dominant F, then you have that characteristic. You can have another dominant F and still have the characteristic, or you can be F with a lowercase, no freckles, but you still will show freckles. So that line just indicates that you have two alleles, but one of them is dominant. So if you are recessive, then you're going to have little f, little f. It's the only way you have no freckles. So you're either going to have freckles here or you have no freckles, okay? Since we're dealing with a single trait, there are only three basic combinations that we can find. We can have big F, big F, big F, little f, and little f, little f. So if we have a big F, we have two alleles that are identical to, or little f, we still have two alleles that are identical, then we are considered homozygous. Homo means same, so homozygous is the same alleles. If we have a big F and a little f, like this middle one, then we are hetero, meaning one of each, or different, zygous. So we have one of each alleles, or we have alternate alleles, okay? So an organism that has a big F will exhibit freckles. And so right here, you see this girl has freckles. She has either a big F, or a big F, little f. The only way you can have no freckles is if you have little f, like I had in my toolbox. So remember, in meiosis, when we're producing those gametes, the homologs separate. So only one of each pair goes into any given gamete or sex cell. And what that means is you're going to pass on either the chromosome that you received from your mom or the chromosome that you received from your dad. And they can have alternate characteristics on them, remember. So alternate forms of an allele. So here's two chromosomes. They're homologs. You can have a big G and a little g. Or you might have a big H. Wow, that was weird. And another big H. But only one of these alleles for each is going to go into that gamete. So you might give the little g or the big G to your offspring. And so this is just a table that shows if you're homozygous dominant, then you have two big Fs and you have freckles. If you're homozygous recessive, you have two little f's and no freckles. If you are heterozygous, then you have freckles, but you also have that alternate recessive allele that you can pass on to your children. So you can produce an offspring potentially that is freckleless or no freckles. So a genotype has two alleles for each trait. A gamete has only one allele for each trait. So it only has one. And since in meiosis homologs separate, you can pass on either the allele that your mom gave you or the allele that your dad gave you. And so when you're doing genetics problems, you have to remember this, because you're going to have an allele from mom and an allele from dad that will get passed on to the offspring. So let's look at what that kind of looks like. When you're doing a test cross, you're going to, number one, determine the genotype of the parent. That's the first thing you have to do. List the possible gametes from each parent. Combine all of these possible gametes and then determine the genotype and phenotype of offspring. So these are the steps to do a test cross, or to do a Mendelian cross. So let's look at this here. So we have a homozygous man with freckles. So let's put up here in our toolbox, remember, big F is freckles. And little f is no freckles. All right, so now we have that written down. We have a homozygous man with freckles. What does that tell you? He has two of the same alleles, and they have to be big F, because he has freckles. Reproduces with a woman that has no freckles. So if you have no freckles, you have to be homozygous recessive. So there's your dad, and there's your mom. That's that first step, okay? Now, we have to look at what type of gametes can dad form. Dad can give to his offspring either this big F or this big F, right? That's all he can give. So dad can only produce a big F for his offspring, which is what you see right there. Mom can only give this little f or this little f, but they're always only little f's. So this is dad's gamete. Mom can only give a little f as her gamete. And there's mom's gamete right there, okay? So mom is big, or dad is big F, and he's giving a gamete of one big F. Mom is little f, and she's giving her gamete of one little f. So the offspring are going to get a big F from dad and a little f from mom, which means every one of the offspring is going to be heterozygous. And is going to show freckles. So I'm going to stop here, and we're going to get into solving these crosses, specifically when we have hybrid or heterozygous organisms, in the next video. Okay? Bye.